Sports Shop and on mixlr.com/wakeupcall.dt. Proud to be here with you every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You're also watching us on Facebook.com/live-now-dt, Facebook.com/wakeupcall.dt, and on YouTube.com/wakeupcall.dt. From inside the Cafe Cubal studios, Cafe Cubal coming to you with locations all throughout central and upstate New York, 3501 James Street, 324 West Water Street, 208 North Townsend Street, 401 South Salina Street, as well as in downtown Syracuse inside of Galisano's Children's Hospital, who we thank very much for all the work they do for our children and our families, and prayers go to them today for a successful day, as well as you could find them out on 343 Fayette Street in Manlius, New York, and of course their newest location and first ever drive-through for the local Cafe Cubal here in central New York on the corner of Route 11 and Taft Road, Sweetheart Corners in North Syracuse. So, with that being said, inside of MonPazPopcorn.com is what's popping. We have a show set up for you today in hour number one dedicated to the ACC Kickoff that, believe it or not, happened a week ago. And this past Wednesday, I was sitting in the front row, right in front of the coaches, right in front of the players, with this man off to my left. And he'll be joining us in just a second, Trip Durham of 2D Consulting. And then after Trip, we'll have Christopher Heidel from Herb FM Sports Radio. And hour number two will be our Fantasy Football Power Hour, as always. And today, Mike Sofka and I will be bringing you our Fantasy Football Mock Draft 2.0. Now that we know that Aaron Rodgers is actually going to play some football, we have some things to talk about that'll change that draft up a little bit. So, with all that being stated, let's bring in Trip Durham. He's usually the one introducing me a week ago, but now I get to introduce him, so let's bring him in. Trip, how we doing?
I'm doing fine, Dan. It'll be a lot of fun for me to actually answer questions as opposed to pointing to people in the room to have them ask questions.
You know, and Trip, for you coming to us from 2D Consulting, and you get to work with the ACC and be an MC of sorts to run on the ACC network to bring everybody back, introduce them, let them know what teams are coming up, and be there at the podium to facilitate all this. What is it like for you because you've done it for so long and done it very seamlessly and successfully from my point of view, emceeing that TV room, video room, so to speak, and when everything is on the ACC network, just what it's like for you to MC something like that?
Well, I appreciate the invite to be on with you today. Setting the scene for your followers, the room is a grand ballroom at the Westin Hotel, and in Uptown Charlotte, in that room for the 2 days, there are beat writers, there are .com agencies, there's traditional media when it comes to television. So it's a room that houses probably up to 150 people at its max. And in the very, very, very back of that room, ESPN has their set up to catch the coaches and student athletes in rotation from the room that I moderate. A dated reference, I like to think of me being more of a traffic cop, the guy standing at the intersection, bringing some cars in that way, holding up some others, and allowing other vehicles to go the other way. It can be interesting at times, depending on the coaches or the student athletes in the room that people want to talk to. Every year there seems to be a little bit of fervor for one school compared to another, for one student athlete or coach compared to another. So there'll be times in which there are a lot of people wanting to come through the intersection that I have to say, okay, you go first, then we'll get you second. Let's go ahead and cue up the microphone to get ready for that third person in order. And all of that in about a 30-minute window. So when you ask me what it's like, I found it interesting last week, since we could not all be together in 2020, I found it interesting that it was almost, to the old adage, like falling off a bike and getting right back on. It all felt natural. So, Malcolm Gladwell speaks to the 10,000 hour rule, Dan, that if you do anything for 10,000 hours, you're liable to get pretty good at it. I've done this enough to where it just feels natural. So I don't know if that's enough of a way to answer your question, but I feel like I rambled on long enough that maybe I'll just put a period right there.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I understand what you do and going about it. Like you said, the room changes depending on who's in that room and who they want to talk to and whatnot. And I kind of want to jump right to that grand piece, which is when Clemson comes into the room. And it's the feeling of it gets quiet in the room when certain teams are coming in and out and there's maybe less people there. Then all of a sudden with Clemson, you just kind of let it take about 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe maximum. You turn around and the entire room is filled with people. Everybody's waiting for Dabo Swinney to say something about something. Bring me into that, the evolution, because there was a time where Dabo Swinney was hired for the job as the wide receivers coach, and he said they were going to win in Clemson, and he was laughed at in a press conference, and now he is the press conference. So what can you say about, when Clemson walks into the room and the feel of that, and knowing that for the last couple of years we've ended with Clemson?
Beachgoers will understand the analogy, and to your point, Dan, there is a rotation. There's a different flow as different schools come in and out. And so the beach analogy is the rhythm of the waves. When Clemson comes into the room, there's this push to shore with the wave. When a school from out of market, from Charlotte, comes into the room, there's sort of that retreat of the wave. So it's the ebb and the flow of the way schools come in and out of that grand ballroom. North Carolina, based on the personality of Mac Brown and some of their student athletes, and certainly being local to Charlotte, there was that flow into the shore. But when Syracuse, for example, and it's not picking on Coach Babers or student athletes, they are out of market. They don't get the attention that some of the beat reporters in Charlotte might give Syracuse or some other schools. So there's a bit of an ebb there, right? So the room sort of falls off a little bit. It's interesting to watch. There are some years in which you predict that one school is not going to be asked a lot of questions, but gosh, the room gets filled with questions. There's some years in which you feel it's just going to be natural that a school gets a fair amount of questions, and they don't, and I've got to fill in with my own questions from the podium because sound bites still need to be captured. Video still needs to get its video. So you can't have a 30-minute session with only 3 questions in total. You've got to make sure that you stretch it out to the 30 minutes with some really good, intriguing questions, and so that's all part of the rhythm of the room.
Yeah, and speaking here with Trip Durham of 2D Consulting, a big part of connecting with ACC Kickoff as he is there hosting in the grand ballroom all of the teams that come through. 14 schools converging on Charlotte, North Carolina in 2 days. I love it. The more work that I get, the more it feeds me, the more I get excited about it. How do you take in, 7, obviously the Atlantic and then 7 in the coastal, having so much throughout the day and knowing that you're going to be, in that room for a while, the half-hour periods, there's really only a few minutes in between. What do you think of the setup and kind of the excitement and, uniqueness of the fact that the entire conference is all in one place, so you really have an opportunity to build bridges with schools from all over the country?
I really like the way the ACC has the press conference set up. And for anybody that has worked on their feet for a good portion of the day, I think they'll empathize a little bit with me here. Once the event gets started, generally at about 9:45 in the morning, the event, at least within the press conference room that I'm a part of, once it starts, it goes. Right, so you get into the pattern of schools coming in, schools coming out, to your point, a quick little break here and there, and you don't give much thought to the expansive amount of time that it is. Again, for people that work on their feet for 8-10 hours a day, you're just in it and you just do it. It's what you've come to expect of yourself. It's what other people have come to expect of you. So you're not really clock watching a whole lot. There's not really a point to where I, and maybe you do, sitting out in the room with everybody else, I never feel like, gosh, 4 more schools to go. 2 more schools to go. It's fun to be in that environment. And if you like what you do, time goes by pretty quickly. You don't even think about time. It was fun for me to be back in that environment, as I'm sure it was for a lot of people. The one thing that I feel like that we have missed through all of 2020 with all of the challenges that the world has gone through is that we have been deprived of filling our senses. And what I mean by that is we can sit in our offices and we can have a video call, and a video call may be of a different topic with a different person from hour to hour or day to day. But what we're not getting is we're not getting the aromas of somebody else's building. We're not getting the touch of somebody else's carpet. We're not getting the taste of somebody else's coffee. We're not able to change our scenery on a regular basis. So to have an event like ACC Kickoff last week and to, gosh, I hate that people are using this word, but to feel normal again, and to explode those senses like we're used to, that it was a booster shot. I think you just referred to it that way. And it just felt good.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it felt like you said. I know you said you don't want to use the word normal, but to go down to Charlotte, get off the plane, and obviously, you have to wear a mask when you're traveling, but to take the mask off, to go to the Westin Charlotte, to get all your stuff. Everybody's walking around, nobody's wearing a mask. You can sit wherever you want to sit. I can shake hands with the coaches. I can talk with them on the side. We can have lunch together. You and I, talked. I mean, there was a time that it really just hit me where I said, wow, it's like none of this sad, confusing, stressful year and a half happened. It felt like life was just what it was supposed to be. And like you said, when you enjoy what you do and you love what you do, you don't look at the clock. You're not worried about that. And there's excitement and there's fun in it. I left Charlotte with all the work that I try to put forward in Charlotte. I left Charlotte saying to myself, what am I supposed to do on Friday? So, I mean, that was my mindset. Give me, go ahead.
We do see that in our lives, that we build ourselves up to a particular moment or an event, and then there is a little bit of a crash afterwards. So I would imagine a lot of people felt that crash, especially after the last 15 months. So I think, Dan, that's a great way to frame it up.
Yeah, I was like, do we have 7 more teams? Is there anybody else we can look to? But Trip, for you prepare questions. I prepare questions for everybody that comes up to the podium, every team. You have to be prepared for that. How do you go about the research and kind of the angles that you look for? Because like you said, sometimes when there's not a question from the room and you have to fill some time, you have to be prepared for that. So speak to that a little bit, the fact that you are researching all 14 institutions and kind of how you go about your questions.
Any of your followers that have, any of your listeners who have conducted research of any kind, they know that there are certain elements within research that fit their eye compared to another particular facet of their research. As long as I've been in college athletics, I understand the makeup of a media guide, of a preseason prospectus, of a recap of statistics from a previous year. So my eye is trained on all of the cells and variables and paragraphs that go into those type of resources. What I've done is with my unique eye, I try to find the stat or the nugget that's just a little bit different. And when I say different, I don't mean at the other end of a football spectrum. I'm not talking about that this kid chews pink bubble gum as opposed to purple bubble gum. I'm looking for something that is not going to be a question that a media member would ask. It's a piece of information that might lead to a larger answer. And it could be, Dan, that it's the right question based on what I'm seeing with the student athlete's personality in real time at the podium, that maybe the room needs a little bit of levity.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to find something that's not all about stats and figures. Maybe it's what's it like to be on the same team as your younger brother? At that point, you're going to pull a smile from a student athlete. You're going to see a lot more teeth, right, because they open up wide. And you just got to find those moments. So I've never really thought about it this way, but I think there's a fair amount of showmanship that you have to consider when asking the questions. What is appropriate for the room? What does the room need right now? And so I think that's all part of it.
Yeah, in reading the room and trying to understand that from the questions that you did ask, is there a moment from the 2021 ACC kickoff that stood out to you, be it from something that was asked, something that you asked, something that happened within the run of things? Do you have a moment or a few moments from this year that really you kind of took with you, like taking a shampoo from the West End Charlotte?
Well, let's be clear that I took it from my own room. It's not that I grabbed any on the cart on the way to the elevator.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, well, if that's what you're into, Dan, but I'm not going to endorse such behavior. Our head coach at Boston College, Jeff Halfley, he is one that really stands out to me, and you and I spoke of it as Boston College left the room, and I mean this with great reverence. I mean this with all kinds of respect. This was his first kickoff event, even though it was Boston College's second year with this head coach, because, again, last year we did not have this event.
Yeah.
So when Coach came into the room and took the podium, and for your listeners, the rhythm was head coach is there for about 15 minutes, and then we split time amongst the 3 student athletes from the school that are there for the other 15 minutes. So Coach Halfley gets up at the podium. He's introduced. We ask for the first question. The first question is asked. And Coach is, I'll just describe it as, I saw him as very stiff. Like he was trying to figure out what his personality was going to be in the room. Now, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
By the end of the 15 minutes, Dan, he had exploded and shown his true extroverted personality. And it was awesome to watch him go to this level of unbridled enthusiasm from a start of, "Hi, my name is Coach, and I'm at Boston College." Now, again, I'm being very facetious, but when you say, are there moments that stand out, watching the evolution of somebody's personality in real time, minute by minute, question by question, was almost hysterical to watch. It was awesome. Now, the other moment that stood out, too, was Coach Mac Brown at North Carolina. I never had to tee up a question because the room was ready to take this old ball coach into their arms, this old TV broadcaster into their arms, and we could have just had a one-on-one bowl session with Coach Brown for an hour and a half. The room was that engaged. It was that electric. Had a student athlete with a bow tie. One student athlete out of all that came through over 2 days had a bow tie, which was great. He even got a round of applause from his head coach, Bronco Mendenhall, when the UVA student was recognized for having the bow tie. So there are little moments like that that make the event endearing, which I think is just sort of fun.
Yeah, and I remember, another thing about ACC Kickoff that you and I haven't talked about is the reality that some of these names are very not easy to say. And you have to do your due diligence and your research and whatnot. And I remember one of the gentlemen who is now an Atlanta Falcon who played for the Virginia Cavaliers, probably the name that comes to mind first when I think of difficult names that you want to be sure about, was Olamide Zaccheaus. And
you're just showing off now.
but you, as the moderator of the room, so to speak, like you have to know that. So how many times are you kind of fact checking and pronunciation guides when it comes to some of the names out there, because they're not always easy?
Well, thankfully, there are some really good resources out there. On a lot of the rosters these days that you find on the school's website, you'll see an icon of an ear, and that ear indicates that there is a pronunciation that you can click and listen to. So that helps. The sports information directors at the schools are fantastic in making sure that you're ramped up. A name is very personal, and the name is very important not only to the person whose name you are reading, but also to their family as well. So I do find a bit of pressure at times to make sure that I get it Right. Being a longtime public address announcer and serving as PA announcer for Duke football and basketball, I try as hard as I can to make sure that when that button is pushed to talk, that I get it right. And, as an aside, it's really interesting. You and I could banter names left and right. And we think we got it right. We feel like we're pretty good about the name. But there's a different pressure when you actually have to push the button and say it to a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
And you'll notice last week, because I didn't have a lot of time the way the room was set up, there were players and coaches coming in from one end of the room, and I was set up on the other far end of the room. I didn't get a chance to really get confirmation on pronunciations. So you'll notice last week, I didn't utter a single last name. I did all first names. And I did it from school number 1 on Wednesday morning through Clemson school number 14 on Thursday afternoon. So, just my little secret.
Trip Durham 2D Consulting here with us today on Wake Up Call, speaking on the 2021 ACC Kickoff. Trip, to go through the whole process of these couple days and to be able to be a part of it all, from the tailgate party to the actual work that's done to grabbing some food and just kind of speaking with people in and out of rooms and walking through hallways and whatnot. What is your favorite part? What's the thing that really gets you ramped up for it, because you have stayed connected with the ACC and the ACC Kickoff because of that for such a long time? What keeps you excited, energized, and what are some of your favorite pieces of what we get to do? Because some of it is not on a screen. Some of it cannot be heard. Some of it is, walking out to go to the bathroom, you bump into somebody and start a conversation for 15 minutes, and that's a game changer for the rest of your life. So what can you say about some of your favorite moments?
There's a position statement on the front page of my company's website, and it's not just pedestrian words that are strung together to make it look good as a headline. I am truly inspired by relationships. I am truly driven by collaboration. So a lot of what you just referred to, Dan, is what stands out for me. It's what is special to me. I joked with you before we came on, and this is going to sound really goofy for folks that don't know my personality. But the lotion that I did come back with from the hotel room, I used the rest of that this morning as I was getting ready for my day. And the aroma of that took me back to kickoff last week. So I go back to the sensory. It's hearing the elevator doors opening, and to your point, bumping into somebody that you had not thought that you would. A longtime colleague of mine who I did not know was going to be in Charlotte. I rounded a corner, and there he was. And I gave him the biggest hug I possibly could, because I'm really down on my hug quota these days because of the last 15 months.
Yeah.
And again, it's tasting somebody else's food. It's feeling somebody else's air conditioning. It's hearing the boom of the speakers through a microphone. It's the sensory. So all of that, Dan, is what stands out to me.
And we got to go back and we got to see it. What did these last 15 months teach you about everything? I mean, you're a business owner. You obviously are connected to the world of sports. Everything shut down. And I said this last night when I did our live show on site at Pizza Man Pub with the Lemoyne Dolphins that just won a championship for D2 men's lacrosse. And I said, the first thing we wanted to do when we got locked in our house was to turn on a game, turn on something to take our mind, and there was nothing. And I said that right at the beginning of the pandemic. We have taken for granted the fact there's always something on. So what did these last 15 months teach you, and then to connect it back to the sports world, just what it was like for you to be so ingrained in the sports world and not have new material really coming out for some time?
Two things come to mind. One, and it's going to sound very cliche, but it is a one day at a time. It's so much so that I've never been one to really live in a past. I certainly respect what has happened in the past that has been a foundation for moving forward. But through the last 15 months, once Monday was done, I just gave a lot of thought to my Tuesday. and then what Wednesday could be. So it taught me to be in the moment and to move forward as best you can. It also allowed me to, this is the second part, it allowed me to appreciate things that I have been a part of in the world of sport. And I know this is going to be very granular, very specific. And for an audience of Syracuse fans, I know that they're not going to want to hear a whole lot about Duke, and I get it. But there's a moment in Duke basketball pregame within the last minute of warm-up in which the song Every Time We Touch is played. It has become a bit of a rock anthem at Duke. And for basketball, men's basketball, when that song is played, the room, Cameron Indoor, goes crazy. They do this pumping of their fist, alternating one back to the other, almost like a modified jumping jack. It's a really cool moment in sport. And I miss that. I miss the emotion of that. I think Justin Fuente at Virginia Tech probably misses standing in the tunnel and watching the fans react to Enter Sandman, right? There are those traditions in sport that we all lost contact with. To respect that we get a chance to do that again. And then when we do it again, we're going to be more in that moment than we've ever been before. I guess to sum all that up, Dan, is to have an appreciation and not have it feel like routine. I'm sure that I will, every time we touch plays at Cameron, I'm probably going to shed a tear because it's that impactful. I'm not speaking for the head coach at Virginia Tech, but I got to think that he will have to catch his breath when standing in the tunnel before Enter Sandman occurs on September 3rd at Lane Stadium before the North Carolina game. A long-winded answer, but I think those are the two elements that really stand out to me.
Yeah, and they're the things. I mean, we're to remember and to appreciate what you have, and like you said, to take things day by day. I think that's hard for people sometimes. I've been there before myself, and you have to really just. The only way, it's funny, people try to control the past, which is over, and the future, which hasn't happened. The only way to affect the past, the present, and the future in a positive way is to live in the moment, because it builds a good past and it builds toward a better future.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So, final note here, 2D Consulting. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to take a second here for what your company does and what you offer so that people can learn a little bit more about it and how they can get in touch with you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm going to put in one hell of a shameless plug here. 2dconsultingllc.com. My world is assessment for external relations for college athletic departments, as well as project management in the world of sport, being a part-time employee for folks. Next Wednesday, so a week from today, oh my gosh, 51 weeks now in the making, but really 19 years and 51 weeks in the making. I have a 3-part podcast that will release next Wednesday. Each episode is about 37 minutes long, and the title of it is An Elon Football Odyssey. I spent 15 years on the administrative team at Elon University, and Elon football, up until the year 2001, had played all of its football games on the road for 92 years. Elon's first ever on-campus football stadium was to open on September 15th, 2001. So the 3 parts chronicles not only the history of Elon football, but also that moment of impact as football was getting ready to open, that moment of impact around the tragic events of 9/11, and then how the campus moved forward in the shadows of such a tragedy. So you'll be able to find that podcast, An Elon Football Odyssey. If you're a college football fan, I think you'll enjoy the story. An Elon Football Odyssey will be on most streaming platforms, wherever it is you get your podcast. And if for nothing else, you can always go to 2dconsultingllc.com/Odyssey.
It's a beautiful thing and a story that I look forward to seeing, and I know that on your social media you did a little prelude to it. So for Trip Durham here and speaking on the 2021 ACC Kickoff and 2D Consulting LLC, Trip, as always, thank you for everything, and thank you for your hospitality more than anything else. And I look forward to seeing you in October, which in a nice way, I'll see you in about 15 minutes.
You're right about that. Take care.
Take care. We'll talk soon.
See you.
That coming from Trip Durham here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. With that being said, we're going to take a step aside for a fast break. When we come back, we will be here inside the Cafe Cuba studios talking with Christopher Heidel of Herb FM Sports Radio on his experience of the ACC Kickoff, as he was there as well with me in that room that Trip Durham was emceeing. So we'll talk about that with Chris right after this on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Cafe Cuba studios.
Cafe Cabal Mobile Cafe brings the cafe experience to you. We'll roll out to your neighborhood or office, ready to serve our locally crafted espresso bar to our loyal patrons. Inquire at cafecubal.com. Cafe Cabal, coffee for the soul.
This is Amy from Mother's Cupboard, home of the whole frittata. We are open daily 6 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. For takeout orders, call 315-432-0942 and tune in to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora for our monthly food challenge and try our Wake Up Call signature menu item available 7 days a week. Here at Mother's Cupboard, we are Central New York, and it's our honor to serve you.
Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory, located on 201 7th North Street in Liverpool, is home to over 40 flavors with more than 200 flavors in their total wheelhouse. Sky's the limit for this sweet and savory Central New York company. Keep it local at your parties, fundraisers, wedding showers, baby showers, and more by calling 315-450-MA-PA. That's 315-450-6272 for popcorn bars with custom flavors and colors at your upcoming event. Make sure to visit them on 201 7th North Street in Liverpool, New York. And for more information, go to maandpassnacks.com. Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory. How corny are you? The Millhouse Market, located on 3790 New York 13 in Pulaski, New York, is worth the drive every time. Make sure you make your way out to the Millhouse Market, but first download their app on the Google Play or Apple App Store. You'll have their entire menu at your fingertips, from their homemade breads and desserts to their salads, quinoa bowls, rice bowls, and their sandwiches named after the families that help to settle today's Pulaski. Ingrained in our community and ingrained in our taste buds, there is nothing like the Millhouse Market, and that is why from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday and 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sundays, it is worth the drive every time. They have a drive-through pickup window. Don't even have to get out of your car. They also have the indoor dining and the general store there for you on 3790 New York 13 in Pulaski, New York. So head out to the Millhouse Market today. With that being stated, here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora from inside of the Cafe Cuba studios, Cafe Cuba coming to you with multiple locations in central and upstate New York, including their newest location, which is their first ever drive-through, Sweetheart Corners, corner of Route 11 and Taft Road in North Syracuse, New York. Go out and visit them today. I get my chai. You can get your coffee. Fill your cup with whatever you'd like at Cafe Cuba. Cold brew and their coffee grab and go is also available for you to make your coffee at home at your leisure. So make sure you head out to Cafe Cuba today. Inside of MonPazPopcorn.com is what's popping. You just heard from Trip Durham of 2D Consulting LLC, and he was the MC of sorts inside of the TV room where I was stationed, as well as Christopher Heidel for the 2021 ACC Kickoff. And Christopher Heidel comes to us from Herb FM Sports Radio in the Baltimore, Maryland area, and we're happy to have him here on the show today to continue the conversation of the 2021 ACC Kickoff and college football in general. So let's bring him in. Chris, how you doing today?
Good morning, Dan. And I got to take a line from Dino Babers the other day. Dan, we missed you, Dan. Dan, we missed you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. And you know what? In that moment, it's kind of funny how it hits, because I totally forgot that I hadn't seen Dino. You know, and it had been a year and a half, but I totally I forgot about it because we've been talking on Zoom calls. And so when he looked at me and I was sitting right in front of him and he said, you know, missed you, Dan, you know, miss seeing you. And I looked up at him and it hit me in that moment. I'm like, I have not been in the same room as Dino, but I felt like I was, because we were at the Dome. We were allowed to be at the Dome for the games. And I was one of the few people, by the grace of God, that was sitting in that building. And so one of the only people that got to see the renovation so far. But Dino was downstairs and we were upstairs doing these Zoom calls. And when they were on the road, we were doing Zoom calls and I was sitting in my car. So, you know, strange to think about it that way. But I got to talk to him after and shake his hand. And I was like, my Lord, you know, it's been almost 2 years since I've seen my head coach in my hometown. So very strange thing. But yeah, man, it's crazy to be in the room. And I was, like I was telling Trip, it felt normal. You know, it felt just, I mean, we weren't socially distanced. We didn't have to wear masks. You know, you and I were talking and having a good time. I mean, honestly, the ACC Kickoff may be the first major event where I felt like life was getting back to normal outside of going to the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl earlier this year.
I agree with you. I mean, I was like, when I got to the Western on Wednesday morning, I felt like I was, I was running for president, shaking everybody's hand. And, I didn't see any babies around to give them a hug or anything. But, it was great seeing everybody. I haven't seen anybody in, 2 years. And like you said, it's all been on Zoom and video chats and all that stuff. And when I got there, I'm like, I was a little hesitant about getting there because I'm like, okay, I haven't been out since this whole thing ended, because I have a girlfriend who has a bad immune system. And I was like, okay, I'm hoping I don't get her sick. I walked in there and I'm like, all right, this is pretty normal. Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen this in years, and everybody was back to being, back to where it was 2 years ago. Shaking hands, talking to people, giving, fists or high fives or whatever. It was great.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. As you and I had talked about, I had never been to the tailgate party, and so I had never been there, and so I saw you, and you're like, hey, man, are you going? And Ewan comes up and he's like, DT, you going? And then Alex Dodd comes out and he's like, DT, you going to the party? And I was like, I guess I am now. I got to shout out the party because rooftop patio outside hanging out, cornhole outside, the cornbread and chili that they had and the conversation. I got to give it up to the ACC and an open bar. Not all weddings have open bar. So the ACC did some really nice things, in front of the scenes and behind the scenes. And, that was probably one of the nicest things, is to be around and to build networks. And you and I have talked on the phone, but haven't, hung out in person. So I thought it was really, really nice to have things like the tailgate party and really just, 15-minute breaks in between where you could step out in the hallway. Some of the best, to me, the best things you can get from events like these are, building relationships and camaraderie and networking. So I thought that was really cool to have something like that.
Oh, I agree with you. It was great. And they've been doing this tailgate party for the last couple of years. I know 2 years ago they had something like that, and it was really cool. I mean, you go up there and you have food and, open bar. And this time it was great meeting everybody, like you, and sit around. We had like a little groups. Everybody had groups and areas. It looked like it was like, like you had your group, your clique, and then your clique, and then we went outside, and like you said, you had cornhole. We were outside. It wasn't hot out that night. Sometimes in Charlotte, you've been down there 8 years ago. It could have been hot and humid, sticky, and all. It was actually a pleasant evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was great. I had a great time. I'm still trying to, I'm trying to lose the LBs from eating all the good shit. But hey, what can you do? It's summertime. It's good to have fun, have ribs and mussels like whatever they had, shrimp and all that. It was great.
Yeah, no, the food was good. Everything was good, and rooftop bar, I can't complain with that at all. But here with Christopher Heidel from Herb FM Sports Radio. Chris, you've gone through, you cover, throughout the ACC, and you and I are similar in that respect, that we like to get a gauge and get a feel and build relationships with all of the institutions. What were some of your major takeaways from the ACC Kickoff? Did you have certain Q&As with coaches or players that you really remembered in a special way, or is there something else about our weeks down there that really hit you in a positive way? What can you say about that?
Well, it started Tuesday night. Ewan and I went to. They always have a night before the ACC kickoff. They had food for people who got there, who were at the hotel, and set up stuff for their broadcast. And I ran into Manny Diaz from Miami. Introduced myself to him and talked to him, and he knew who I was. He said, "Hey, Chris, what's going on? Nice to meet you." And talked to him for a little bit, see how he was doing. And then I saw Davidcliffe just walking around with one of his players.
Yeah.
And I was like, I said, "Hey, Coach Cutcliffe." He's like, "What's up, man? What's going on?" And him and I were talking, and you and I went over there and started talking to him. Just have a good old, like talking as like a neighbor. You saw a neighbor just coming out, your next door neighbor, like, "Hey, neighbor," and we were talking to him, and Coach Cutcliffe goes, I said that he has a player who is from my area, who's a freshman, just got, he just signed him, and he's a quarterback from a high school now where I am. I said, "How's the kid?" And he goes, "Oh, he's doing great." He's like, "You should come down more often." I was like, "Well, if we're not doing Zoom, I'll be there next week."
Yeah.
Yeah, he goes, "Good point." He's like, "Come on down." But those are things cool. And then you see him the next day, and he knows who you are, and he goes, "Hey, man," and put your hand out like Mac Brown. I said hello to him 2 years ago, and I think he remembered who I was. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's the awesome part, and I had experiences like that too, and I love that, and those are the things that aren't on camera, and those and the relationships you build, and Alex Dodd brought it up on the show earlier this week, and he said it, exactly what we're saying. He was like, one of the things that you lose by not being able to be on site and on location is that you build relationships, and when you build these relationships, they're the things that help the interviews to be different. They help the experience to be different. And so when you don't have that for people like you and I and Alex Dodd and Trip Durham and so on and so forth, there's something there that's missing, because we build those relationships behind the scenes, and we get to know the coaches and the players. So when they go up there, we're not just talking about we're not strangers to them, and we're not just asking them a question and that's it. They know who we are, we know who they are, and I think that that's a really cool part of this, is that we have the opportunity to build these relationships again, and like you said, you don't see a coach for a season or two, and then you go out there and you get to have this opportunity to kind of just hang out and talk to them and get to know them more and build relationships with other people, and I think it's amazing. So I mean, my favorite part of ACC Kickoff is building relationships and getting to know people, and we finally got to do that again, which was beautiful.
Like a good example, I saw him Wednesday morning. I saw Pat Duduzzi from Pitt, and I went over to see EJ, the great media relations guy, who does a great job with Pitt, and he's a good friend of mine. He was so happy to see me. And I went over and I said, hey, Coach, how you doing? He goes, "Hey," and EJ goes, "This is Chris Heidel from Herb FM Radio," and EJ actually introduced me to him, and he goes, "Oh," he goes, "Hey," he goes, "I know you, the guy on the video." I was like, "Yeah, the guy on the video." I know. So I was just talking to Pat, and I said, it's great that you do some recruiting in Maryland. I said, if you need any more people, come by my house. I'll get you crabs. You can sit down and have some crabs and help you with recruiting. And I said to him, "Wait a minute, is that an NCAA violation?" He goes, "Not anymore. It used to be."
Yeah. I don't know if anything's an NCAA violation anymore, but I mean, it's and it is. I mean, we had so many things we get to do. We get to vote in the preseason poll and do all those things. Are you surprised? I mean, obviously we're not surprised Clemson on one side, but are you surprised that the majority of the media picked North Carolina? I mean, that's where I went in the Coastal Division. What's your ultimate thought? Do you think it's going to be a battle of Carolinas in the ACC Championship this year?
Well, I think it could. I think North Carolina is the favorite, but I don't want to be biased here, but I have a brother who's a big Miami Hurricane fan, and I think Miami has and according to what Manny Diaz said to me personally, that he saw a focused team after the bowl game. Like when they lost to Oklahoma State, he saw some focus on their players. Normally after the bowl game, all the players go home, they go do whatever they want to do. They're done with the football season. But he goes, no, everybody sat there and looked at each other and said, we have unfinished business to do. And they were focused in spring practice. And he said it was a different type. This season is different than last season. They're all focused and ready to go.
Yeah, in Miami, the media as a whole, we picked them to finish third. I did as well. And so, we'll see where it goes from there as we get set to move forward. Your favorite part about, your job, Chris, you go out there for Herb FM Sports Radio, you talk to a lot of people, you do a lot of things around the country. What gets you most energized? Like, what gets you in that room at ACC Kickoff, no matter how many hours of sleep you had or how the trip was down and whatnot, what keeps you in it and focused and energized and ready to go? What do you love the most about it? Like, where does that energy come from, and what do you love the most about the ACC Kickoff?
Well, it's the cool thing about I'm a big Florida State football fan since I was 9 years old, and I got a chance to talk to Coach Novell, who's the new head coach of my Seminoles, and I went up to him personally before he went around, before he went into the media room, and I said, hey, Coach, I'm Chris Heidel. I've been, a sports media outlet in Baltimore. I've been a big Florida State fan since I was 9 years old, and his face went like, really? I'm like, and he goes, holy. He's like, yeah, 9 years old. And he goes, you want to take a picture of me? So somehow my phone had I don't want to say anything, had some issue or something, but yeah. I tried a picture with him first. It didn't come out. I'm like, all right, let me try it again later with him. The second time, came out fuzzy. So I guess it's not meant to be. But he was really nice, approachable. Yeah. He knows that, he said at an institution. Yes, I heard different chatter about other people who I talked to about how he doesn't, he's all coaches are looking for that advantage, to get a player to come to their school. Yeah. And I don't care about what Clemson is doing. I don't care what Florida State's doing. So what? If we get, it's just somebody, if they get caught, they get caught. Big deal. But, I look at it, he's trying to improve Florida State from, 3-6 was an embarrassment. No offense. For me being a Seminole fan since I was a kid, 3-6 is not unacceptable. It's like the Mets being 159 and 100 and being last place. That's unacceptable. But he knows that he wants to turn his program around, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Like a couple of years ago, you were there a couple of years ago, Willie Taggart was there. Yeah. And Willie Taggart looked at me at the end of his media thing, shook my hand, and he goes, I promise we'll be better this year. Well, Willie, you're down at Florida Atlantic, and you're not the Seminoles coach anymore. I guess it didn't work out there, Chief. But it was pretty funny having a coach come up to me and shake my hand and say, I promise we'll be better this year.
Well, and it's tough.
But these are things, a cool thing about coaches. They get to know you. Yeah. And then when you get on the teleconference call, they know your voice. And they know who you are. And same thing. I missed Dabo Sweeney this year because I had to leave to get back to Harvard, get back to Maryland. Yeah. But Dabo knows who I am, and it's pretty cool to hear. He probably would have been like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" So it's a cool thing to do.
Yeah, it's awesome, and it is. It's true. It's like Dave Clausen. He knows I'm going to be the first question in the room, and so he smiled, big old smile when Wake Forest came up, and he was standing there because I was right in front of him. And then Dave Doran. I mean, I wouldn't have known that guy from anything if not being on the teleconference, and all these years of doing it, and even us not having it this past year. Dave coming off the stage, I was like, how you doing, Coach? He's like, Dan, how you doing? Like, what's going on? How you been? And so, they're not rushing you off. They want to have the conversation. So it's all about networking. It's all about building relationships, and it's all about being an honest person who leads with their best foot forward and tells the truth. You do that, then coaches and players are going to want to talk to you. Christopher Heidel, Herb, what were you saying? Sir. Christopher Heidel, Herb FM Sports Radio, speaking with us on the ACC Kickoff. Well, our kickoff was a little bit different than other people's, namely the Big 12 and the SEC. And so what is your take on the fact of college football realignment? I have a lot of thoughts. I did a show last night at Pizza Man Pub that we love working with here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, and we got to do a championship special, Champions Corner, with the Lemoyne College Dolphins, a men's lacrosse team that just won a national championship, the sixth one for the head coach, Dan Sheehan. And so we're having this conversation, and then, we finish up with our stuff, and I'm at the bar, and, people are just talking and picking my brain about Oklahoma and Texas, and I started just multi-layer talking through all this stuff and things that are on my mind. What's your take? Because I'm locked into the ACC. Last week I'm down there. I'm focused on the 14 schools. I'm doing my research. I got my questions. I'm thinking about things I want to do. I'm focused on the Atlantic Coast Conference, and somebody walks up to me and goes, "What do you think about that Oklahoma thing?" And I was so locked in that I wasn't paying attention to anything. And then I take a step aside, and I'm like, "Oh my Lord!" And then since then, I've had a lot of thoughts and conversations. We had one yesterday with Shamarko Thomas, that played for Syracuse, played in the NFL. What's your thought on Oklahoma, Texas, leaving the Big 12, joining the SEC? The Big 12 is going to be left with 8 schools. We're in a very strange situation, but realignment is happening. And it's happening to one of the conferences that was supposed to be Power 5. So what's your take?
Well, I just feel like, I guess Texas and Oklahoma would like to get that, see how successful the SEC is.
Yeah.
And the SEC has been in the college football playoff semifinal or the final the last, since this thing started. And I feel like the big people in the Big 12, are getting tired of being the little brother or the little guy like sitting out there going, "Hi, can I come in? Can I come in the house?" It's like, they want a piece of that pie. And I think now Texas and Oklahoma, and I think it's really strange that Texas is going to go to the SEC when Texas A&M doesn't want anything to do with them anymore.
Yeah.
It's like that used to be the old rivalry, Texas and Texas A&M. And it when we were kids, Thanksgiving night or day after Thanksgiving, you had Texas and Texas A&M, and now Texas A&M is looking at them going, "Why are you coming?"
Yeah.
It's like they don't want no part of it. And with Oklahoma, I think I think West Virginia's athletic director ripped them. I said, "Why are you doing this to our league?" It's like, you're ruining a very good, you're ruining what our bylaws are, and hey, it's not cheap for them to leave. They got to pay $80 million to leave the Big 12. They come in and then be into the SEC. They got to pay another hefty amount of money. I hope you have that money there, Oklahoma and Texas. Come on now. It's not like $2.50 when you're at school to buy a carton of milk. Come on, that's too much money there.
Well, and the thing is, I'm sure with them, 2025, with that being the time where the granting of rights expires, that they did not renew Oklahoma and Texas with the Big 12. I would imagine, listen, that's 4 years down the road. So I would imagine they're going to negotiate something to be within the next year and a half, 2 years. They'll negotiate down from the $80 million and they'll make it something else. And they'll figure a way to get out. Syracuse negotiated, Pittsburgh, everybody negotiated to come into the ACC. So I'm sure that, they'll figure out what they need to do. But the question is now, and I brought this up and we talked about it off the air a little bit. You said it. I had said it earlier earlier this week on the show too. Makes a lot of sense. Big rivalries with Pittsburgh, with Syracuse. West Virginia makes sense to come into the ACC, who also makes sense to come into the ACC. And hear me out, folks. I know in football it doesn't make sense, but Kansas coming into the ACC for all sports, you would have Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, Syracuse, like those storied programs in basketball. And for them to face off against each other, if you bring in Kansas to even it out, because West Virginia makes sense, but you want to even it. So you bring in Kansas, here's the twofold thing. West Virginia makes sense with rivalries, and they make sense because they've done it on the court and they've done it on the field. Kansas makes sense because they've done it on the court, and they're one of the teams that not only makes the NCAA tournament, but oftentimes they're considered to be a number 1 or a number 2 seed. Huge to have them in there with North Carolina, Duke, Syracuse, and so on and so forth. And for Syracuse, you will not be the worst football team anymore. So, because Kansas doesn't win many, if any, games each season. So, what do you think about if the ACC were to bring in West Virginia, What do you think about that move, and who else would you want them to take from it? Does Kansas make sense? Is there somebody else you'd rather them take and put in? What makes sense to you? Because I kind of have bracketed out where I think the Big 12 is going to dissolve, and I've kind of figured out where everybody's going to go in my head. But what do you think about who should join the ACC if somebody did?
Well, I agree with West Virginia because this year West Virginia is playing Virginia Tech, and then in a couple of years they're playing Pitt in the backyard brawl again. They haven't done that in years.
Yeah.
But with Kansas, I think they should be there for basketball, not for football. Football, send them to some different conference because I feel like the football team is going to be like Rutgers. Hey, no offense to Rutgers. No offense. I like Rutgers, New Jersey. Yeah, it's okay. I'm from New York. We make fun of New Jersey people, but it's okay. But Rutgers, back when they were in the Big East, they were terrible, and they were asked to get out of the Big East and go to somewhere else for a while. And then now they're in the Big Ten, and I feel like with Kansas, it's going to that's going to be a win-win for everybody. Like Miami's going to take on Kansas, and Kansas is going to get steamrolled. I think Kansas needs to move to the ACC for basketball only, and for football, put them in some conference. Like maybe the Big Ten or something like that, because you got a lot of people in the Big Ten in that area. And let them play against Nebraska and whoever. And I think that should be fine. And maybe my opinion is maybe with the Big Ten, bring Maryland back into the ACC because I really think Maryland's football team will be better in the ACC than in the Big Ten because you see in the Big Ten, dude, there's a lot of people want players, and you got Penn State, Michigan, you got the powerhouses, and I feel like Maryland's playing behind because they can't keep anybody home for football. Basketball, keep them in the Big Ten for basketball. That's fine. Big Ten basketball is great. Maryland's doing a great job recruiting. The Maryland coach Turgeon is doing a great job keeping, they won the Big Ten title a couple years ago. Keep them in the Big Ten for basketball and move them back to the ACC for football.
See, I think what's going to happen is if you move as a total. And I think Maryland makes sense to come back to the ACC because, to me, they've never really left. Like, it just didn't feel like the right move. And West Virginia makes a lot of sense. The American Athletic Conference is in a great place because TCU is joining the Big East. Syracuse, Louisville, and Pitt left. TCU pulled themselves from joining, went to the Big 12 instead. Now you can call TCU again. What did the American Athletic Conference just do? They moved their home base from Providence, Rhode Island to where? Irving, Texas. So, ahead of all of this happening, for those of you that think that everything is a coincidence, so they moved there. They got SMU. They got Houston. Now they can call Texas Tech. They can call Baylor. They can call TCU. I think Baylor and TCU make sense. I mean, anybody makes sense for the American because they're all over the country, but TCU would give them 12, and TCU would firm that up. So if they could just get TCU back to it, and TCU, that was the school that was talking to Mike Resco a few years ago, if they can bring that together and they can make that happen, then they get better, they get a better footprint, and people say, well, why would you leave the Big 12 for the American? Because the Big 12 is, in my opinion, on the verge of collapse. And as they're dissolving, the American's been saying, we're a Power 6. If the Big 12 disappears, there needs to be another Power 5 conference. American steps into that. All the money's freed up at ESPN because the Big 12 is not getting it. That money, some of it, can go to the American Athletic Conference so they can divvy up the money better. So the teams leaving the Big 12 may not make as much, but they'll make more than what the American teams were making, and the American teams that are there, like UCF and Houston and Cincinnati, will make more money with the deal. I think that this, Mike Oresco, dang it, a decade of just waiting and working and believing and trying to be a good person and trying to do things the right way, it seems like it's paying off. It could be paying off, and the American's going to get better. The ACC stands to get deeper. The irony of everything we talked about is when we were at the ACC Kickoff and we were discussing it, and I said the Big 12 has 10 and the Big 10 has 14, and there were people sitting at the table going, wait, what? And I was like, that's the truth. None of it makes sense anymore. So, if and when the Big 12 dissolves, I think a bunch of those teams will go to the Pac-12. You might see somebody knock on the door of the Big 10, but they already have 14. The American can get a couple. at least TCU, if not a couple other ones, and then the ACC, West Virginia, and somebody else. And now all of a sudden we're going back to super conferences, and we're going to have a potential autonomous 5 still with the American joining into things. But that's my take. That's my thought. I got a lot of other thoughts underneath that, but what's your overall take? How do you see the future when the dust settles? What's the Pac-12 look like? What's the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, the American, the Big 12? What does it look like through your looking glass?
Well, I feel like with the Big 12, it's going to be gone. See you later. They might go back down to, originally they used to be the Big 6 back in the old days, or the Big 8, and Nebraska's gone and Oklahoma's gone. How are you going to be the Big 8 without those two? Texas and all those Texas teams were in the old SWAC back in the old days when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now and even Arkansas was packed in the SWAC. So I feel like maybe a Pac-12 league might pick up somebody like maybe somebody who because they picked up Colorado and Utah years ago. Maybe they pick somebody that might help Colorado out, because Colorado's been struggling in the Pac-12. Maybe find a rivalry for Colorado, or something like that. Or maybe, just like you said with the American Conference, you'll see a Texas division, and you'll see and you have 2 divisions in the American Conference. You got the Texas division, because you already have Houston, you already have SMU. You got almost half the state of Texas in the American Athletic Conference. Yeah. So just make a Texas division, and that's all you need. And then you have the rest of the teams like, over here, UConn's gone. They're back in the, they're independent for football, but they're in Big East for basketball. They're gone. All the teams are still left over, like Central Florida. But what about Central Florida now? Would they call and say, hey, ACC, will the ACC just lock up everybody in the state of Florida? Because because you don't want all the Florida teams to go to the SEC. Does the ACC say, hey, Central Florida, would you like to would you like to join us? Or, or South Florida, those 2 teams, but that takes it away from you guys, from Americans. So it's going to be different, and we'll see in what the next couple of years what's going to be, but I feel like by 2025, we're going to be waking up that one day for ACC Media Day going, where are they? Yeah. Like we need a map, or we need like somebody to give us like an up, have West Durham. No offense, West Durham's a good friend of ours. Maybe West Durham do like a a demo, on ESPN. Like, okay, this is where people are. I'll take him anytime for that.
I think what's going to happen is we're going to see. I mean, it makes the most sense for Maryland and West Virginia, but at least West Virginia to come in and to pull that in. And, and if the ACC really wanted to do this, I know they just joined the Big East, but they kind of got screwed in football. That if they want to even out football, they could bring in UConn. It's not going to bring much to them. I don't think the ACC would do it without the basketball side. But, there's something to be said about Maryland and West Virginia. I could see us within the next couple of years going to ACC Kickoff and going to ACC Operation Basketball, and I see the Maryland logo and the West Virginia logo again. I can see the TCU logo at the American Athletic Conference and maybe the Baylor logo. So, there's things that I can see. I trust my gut, and think times are changing, but I just think it's the irony of the Big 12. 2 years ago, I'm at the American Athletic Summer Kickoff, and we're at Goat Island in Newport, Rhode Island, and I'm in that room, and Mike Oresco's talking, and there's a ton of people there, more people than before. And why? Because there was this air of the Big 12, and who are they going to take, and how many were they going to take in their expansion. Fast forward 2 years, and now the American is on the other side going, well, who do we want to take? So I find it very funny that the Big 12 was going to try and poach a league that had already been poached a billion times, and now the tables have turned, and now there's an opportunity for the American Athletic Conference to be the ones going, you know what? Who are we going to call? Who are we going to take? And TCU would be a perfect fit. Moving to Irving, Texas would be perfect for this. It brings them a lot of good stuff. So, and that Mike Oresco wanted it before. So, I think the Oklahoma States of the world, Pac-12. I think, the Kansas States, Pac-12, and some of that stuff starts to move. But the ACC stands to get something. The American can really just call the rest of the 8 and see what they say. And then, we'll see where everybody else shakes out. But the Pac-12 is going to have to jump on this because them and the Big 12 are not well represented in the college football playoff. So, it makes sense to see where these guys are going. And the SEC, no matter what we say about anything, the one thing I know when I wake up in 2025, God willing, is that the SEC will be fine. So,
Yeah.
they'll always be okay. So.
Yeah, and back to about Maryland, I'm a kid who came from New York, lived in New York, moved down here to Maryland, and the only thing I knew about when Maryland sports was they were in the ACC. They were the founding members of the ACC. They were the ones that, put this whole league together, and then, like, a couple of years ago, they left to go to the Big Ten, and I'm like, why? Why do you leave? Okay, at the time, the ACC didn't have the money like, what the Big Ten had, but now the ACC has their ACC network. They're getting more, more revenue from different bowl games. They got more bowl games than you ever seen. Like, do you ever think the Holiday Bowl is going to be having an ACC squad against a Pac-12 squad? I never thought that was going to ever happen. Because back when I was a kid, it was a Big 10 or a Big 12 or whoever against a Pac-12. Now it's like the ACC against Pac-5 or something like that, or Pac-12's 15 or something like that. That's pretty cool. So now the times are changing, and it's time for Maryland to look back and go, look, maybe we should go back to the ACC because they're doing a great job now. And maybe we could go back home. But if they go back home, Maryland needs to apologize to North Carolina and Duke and everybody else because they kind of burned bridges when they left the building. They told Duke, like, we're not rivals, for basketball, and Duke people are, like, offended by it. They go, like, okay, what was that whole games back in the days with Rams taking a buzzer beater and beating Maryland by 2 at College Park? I guess that wasn't a rivalry, or the language that came out of the whole thing. Like Maryland fans yelling at Duke players in effigy. It's like, come on, that was a rivalry.
Well, and Maryland left preemptively. They didn't. I don't think Maryland really thought it through, and it was like they did it, and then they kind of looked over their shoulder as they grabbed their bag out of their ex-girlfriend's apartment and walked out the door, and then before they even got to the car, it's like, man, I'm gonna miss that girl. So that's where Maryland is at. Well, you got a chance to come back, Maryland, but Morgantown seems like they could be coming to the ACC, and it'll definitely give more relevancy to Pittsburgh and Syracuse because, they love to beat up on each other. And West Virginia, I think Syracuse is 4-0 against you on the field for the last 4 college football games. But who am I to count? So with that being said, very happy Christopher Heidel came on with us today. Herb FM Sports Radio. Chris, as always, I appreciate you. And thank you for everything you do. Let everybody know really quick here before we hop off how people can get in touch with you and your show.
Well, our show airs normally. We did a special show this past Monday, you and McCreef and myself. We did a special show called Sports Talk with Chris Heidel. This past Monday, we did the Coastal Division. We talked about, Pitt, North Carolina, Miami, Georgia Tech. Talked about a little Georgia Tech. Next week on the program, we're going to be back live for Wednesday night at 7:05. Hopefully, Dan could come on and we could talk some Syracuse if he's available, if he's not jogging.
I can come on when I'm jogging. You know that. I've already done it. I can multitask. So
if you want to come on next Wednesday night, we'll be on 7:05 to 8:30. We're going to talk about the Atlantic Division, talk Florida State, Syracuse, and we'll play the clip of Dino Babers want to give you a big hug, before the ACC kickoff. When he talked to you in the press room. Yeah. Plus, we got the Jim Thorpe Award winner coming on next. The president of the Jim Thorpe Award coming on to talk about the preseason list. He was supposed to come on this past week, but family issues, so he'll come on next week. And you can always find us, folks. Our website is herbfmsportsradio.webley.com, and you can find us on YouTube. We're on YouTube. You can watch all our videos, our shows live on YouTube.
Okay.
Just type in Herb FM Sports Radio. You can find us on Twitter at Herb FM. You can watch it on Twitter because Periscope's hooked up to StreamYard. And then we're also on Facebook. You can just type in Herb FM Sports Radio on Facebook, and you can see what we're doing. And then now I added to TikTok, so we're on TikTok. So if you want to see what we're doing this week, I'll post what our schedule is for the show, and just join us. And hopefully, find us wherever you want. And if you want to email us, you can always email me at herbfmradio@gmail.com, and we can answer your questions or any concerns. So we'll do that as well. Or maybe vote on our best pizza. You and I, because we love food. So maybe we'll vote on the best Syracuse pizza next week. I don't know. We haven't been there yet.
Yeah, well, you got to get yourself over here. Everybody talks about New York City, but Syracuse holds their own when it comes to pizza. So with that being Chicken Riggies and Utica Greens and Kigley's and all the things that people don't know about if you leave Central New York. But if you come here, you ain't going to want to leave. I mean, that's the thing. People will say, can you bring this with you? We go down to Florida. Can you bring Kigley Donuts with you when you come down here? So we always try to, help people out. Care packages from Central and Upstate New York. I love my hometown. So with that being said, Christopher Heidel, Herb FM Sports Radio. Check him out, as he said, a lot of different channels, YouTube, whatnot, and make sure you get in touch with them. Chris, as always, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming out to the ACC Kickoff little breakout area and coming over to me and talking. It provided a great week. We got to connect and do a lot of cool things and enjoy some fun. So I appreciate your kindness, and I appreciate your connection. So, as always, I'll look forward to talking with you soon.
Sure thing, Dan. I want to do a little shout out. I have cousins who live in Saratoga Springs, New York, some cousins of mine. So
yeah.
I don't know if they're tuning in to listen to you, but I hope they're doing okay. And hopefully one day I'll make a trip up to Saratoga Springs and see them and head on up your way.
Yeah, man, you're always welcome. And my guest yesterday is in Saratoga Springs right now, Gina Castelli. So kind of a small world. So
yeah, it is a small world. I feel like it's Cheers where I live in. Everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
Everything's over with.
And in the sports world, it only gets smaller if you're doing it right. So
exactly.
I will look forward to talking with you soon and be well, okay?
All right, buddy. Take it easy.
All right, you too.
I see you.
Take
Bye.
care. That coming from Christopher Heidel. One more time on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports meets that thing called life. So a lot of great stuff coming up here as we get ready. ACC coverage, my Q&As with every single school are coming up over the next 2 weeks. This upcoming week is the Atlantic Division, which will be led by Syracuse. We'll get that going for you. We'll have Syracuse as well as NC State, Florida State. We will have Boston College, Clemson, Wake Forest, and I think I covered them all, right? I got them all within that BC. I said Boston College. So we'll have the Atlantic Division this coming week, and then the week after that, we'll have Duke, North Carolina, Georgia Tech, Miami, Virginia Tech, Virginia, and Pittsburgh in the Coastal Division. So we have plenty of stuff coming up. I'm so impatient that I wanted to just put my 63 Q&As on this week's show, but I gotta take my due time and give everybody their spotlight, because there's a lot of things, a lot of information to go through, a lot of stuff to talk about. 14 schools. So over the next 2 weeks, you're going to be completely stocked with ACC coverage, and I can't wait. I'm excited about it. So we'll take a step aside for a fast break. When we come back, we'll get set for the Fantasy Football Power Hour Mock Draft 2.0 coming up with Mr. Mike Sofka. Stay with us right here, and we'll talk with you very, very soon here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside the Cafe Kubal Studios. In these unique times, there are those in our community that give us a sense of normalcy and positivity. Pizza Man on 50 Oswego Street in Baldwinsville has been here for you for over 35 years and is here now. Call 315-638-1234 or order online at pizzamanbville.com to bring those familiar tastes into your home. And remember to come see our monthly on-site broadcasts centered around the community and our Baldwinsville Bees. Pizza Man in Baldwinsville. Any way you slice it, they are always here for you.
I had a deep feeling that God wanted me to do something bigger with my life and to help people, help others. I kept putting Chick-fil-A in my life, and I realized as I was going through the franchise selection process that positively impacting the lives of others was really core to what we do here at Chick-fil-A. First of all, it starts with the food. The food is brought in fresh daily. We bring in local produce. We prepare to order in the kitchen. We hand butter chicken. We hand spin our milkshakes. It's great food. It doesn't taste like fast food. I think the second thing is the way people feel when they come in a Chick-fil-A restaurant. It's different. We try to treat people with intentional kindness here, which is very different and deeper than good customer service. And so I think it feels remarkable for most people to come in a Chick-fil-A restaurant. And then lastly, the impact that we try to have in the community is very different. It's a big part of the expectation of every operator of a Chick-fil-A restaurant is that they're actively engaged in their community, they're a leader in the community, and they're making a difference. When they realize that what we're striving to do is to shine a little light in their life, that's a very, very different experience than you will have in any other quick service restaurant. And it's that remarkable experience that I think people will emotionally connect with.
I'm George Townsend of Honda City with some good advice when buying a new car. The true cost of owning a new car is determined by the appraised value when you trade it. No vehicle appraises higher than a Honda. Next, look for low APRs and deep discounts. You also want low maintenance costs and great fuel economy. That's why my advice to you is to buy a new Honda. Looking pre-owned, visit our Honda Certified Used Car Center. Honda City, 7140 Henry Clay Boulevard, Liverpool, or HondaCity-CNY.com.
It would be a pity if you don't shop at Honda City.
This is Jimmer Sikowski, owner-operator of Chick-fil-A Cicero, 7916 Brewerton Road in Cicero, right in front of the Home Depot. Our corporate purpose at Chick-fil-A is to glorify God by being faithful stewards of all that's entrusted to us and to positively influence all those who come in contact with Chick-fil-A. And what became increasingly clear from our success in Cicero is that people love Chick-fil-A. And also I think we recognized that we had a great opportunity to grow the brand and grow our platform. I felt incredibly grateful when I was selected to be a Chick-fil-A operator. I think what it's meant for me, what I've come to realize on a very deep level is that this is a calling for me. It's not a career. It's not a job. The Lord called me to be a Chick-fil-A operator and to use these restaurants to glorify Him and to positively influence other people. I'm blessed. I'm very blessed.
Head to Chick-fil-A Clay on 3974 State Route 31 in Liverpool, New York. Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on wakeupcalldt.com, your one-stop sports shop, and on mixlr.com/wakeupcalldt. Happy to have you here in the building and having some fun with us where sports meets that thing called life. So appreciate you so very much, and thank you so much for being a part of the show. And definitely, I want to thank my guests for the ACC Kickoff Talk. A big-time thank you to Trip Durham of 2D Consulting LLC, and also a big-time thank you to Christopher Heidel of Herb FM Sports Radio, and plenty coming up for the rest of this week. We got a lot of great stuff that's going to be happening here on Wake Up Call. The entire month is set. This week, set with ACC Kickoff stuff and our mock draft and everything else we're doing. Next week, the entire Atlantic Division, my Q&As with every single one of the 7 schools in the Atlantic Division of the ACC. The next week, all 7 schools of the Coastal Division of the ACC. The following week, Florida in focus, and I'm going to be there with Mike Sofka on site, on location, hanging out, having a live show in Florida. The entire week is Florida in focus. So, and we're going to be doing our fantasy football draft for our Florida League that turns 11 years old this year. So, it's everything coming up is going to be beautiful, and I'm very excited for it. So, by the grace of God, we're going to have some fun, we're going to enjoy it, and we're going to make the absolute most of it. So, with that being stated, we're going to end this video and start a new one so that we have the opportunity to start our mock draft with Mr. Mike Sofka, and I want to make sure that that Mike has our link on Facebook. We got to make sure he follows the newest link so he can join us here in the draft, so he can mock draft with him. And for those of you on MixLR, stay where you are, Facebook and YouTube. We're going to start a new video, as we always do for fantasy football every Wednesday. So stay with us. This video will end. A new one will begin momentarily. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube and you see this one end, know that we're coming